Hello, my name is Daniela. I really enjoy reading books, so I'm going to be reading classic fairy tales retold by 10 different artists. I just got this book, so I really don't know what perspective these stories are going to be told in, so I'm pretty excited to explore this book. Thank you for joining me. I'm recording this in one go, so it's unedited. We'll see how it goes. Enjoy! So, once upon a time, there was a gentleman who married for his second wife, the proudest and most haughty woman that was ever seen. She had by a former husband 2 daughters who were indeed exactly like her in all things. He had by another wife a young daughter, but of unparalleled goodness and sweetness of temper, which she took from her mother, who was the best creature in the world. No sooner were the ceremonies of the wedding over than the stepmother began to show herself in her true colors. She could not bear the good qualities of this pretty girl, especially because they made her own daughters appear to be more odious. She employed the girl in the worst work of the house, making her scour the dishes and tables and clean the stepmother's chamber, as well as those of her daughters. The girl lay up in a sorry attic upon a wretched straw bed, while her stepsisters lay in fine rooms, with floors all inlaid upon beds of the very newest fashion, and where they had mirrors so large they might see themselves in their full length from head to foot. The poor girl bore all patiently and dared not tell her father, who would not have listened, for his wife governed him entirely. When the girl had done her work, she used to go into the chimney corner and sit down among the cinders and ashes, which made her commonly be called Cinderella. But the youngest stepsister, who was not as rude and uncivil as the eldest, called her Cinderella. However, Cinderella, notwithstanding her shabby clothes, was 100 times prettier than her stepsisters, though they were always dressed very richly. One day it happened that the king's son gave a ball and invited all persons of fashion to it. Our young misses were also invited, for they cut a very grand figure in high society. They were delighted at this invitation and were wonderfully busy in choosing such gowns, petticoats, and headdresses as might become them. This was a new trouble for Cinderella, for it was she who ironed her sisters' linen and plaited the ruffles. They talked all day of nothing but how they should be dressed. "For my part," said the eldest, "I will wear my red velvet suit with French trimming." "And I," said the youngest, "shall have my usual petticoat. But then, to make amends for that, I will put on my gold flowered gown and my diamond stomacher, which is far from being the most ordinary one in the world." They sent for the best designer they could get to make up their head dresses and adjust their hats, and they had the red feathers and patches from Mademoiselle de la Poche. Cinderella was consulted in all these matters, for she had excellent taste. She advised them always for the best and offered her services to style their hair, which they were very willing to have her do. As she was doing this, they said to her, "Cinderella, would you not be glad to go to the ball?" "Alas," she said, "you only tease me. Girls such as I are not suited for balls." "You are right," they replied. "It would make the people laugh to see a Cinderella at the ball." Anyone but Cinderella would have styled their hair awry, but she was very good and dressed them perfectly well. The sisters went almost 2 days without eating. They were so overcome with joy. They broke more than a dozen laces in trying to be laced up tightly, as they might have a fine, slender shape, and they were continuously at their mirrors. At last the happy day came. They went to court, and Cinderella followed them with longing eyes. When she had lost sight of them, she began weeping. Her godmother, who saw her in tears, asked her what was the matter. "I wish I could. I wish I could." She was not able to speak the rest, being interrupted by her tears and sobbing. This godmother of hers, who was a fairy, said to her, "You wish you could go to the ball, is that so?" "Yes," cried Cinderella with a great sigh. "Well," said her godmother, "be but a good girl, and I will arrange that you shall go." Then she took Cinderella into her chamber and said to her, "Run into the garden and bring me a pumpkin." Cinderella went immediately to gather the finest she could get and brought it to her godmother, not being able to imagine how this pumpkin could make her go to the ball. Her godmother scooped out all the inside of it, leaving nothing but the rind. Then she struck it with her wand, and the pumpkin was instantly turned into a fine coach gilded with gold. She then went to look into her mousetrap, where she found 6 mice, all alive, and ordered Cinderella to lift up the trapdoor a little. Then giving each mouse, as it went out, a little tap with her wand, the mouse was that moment turned into a fine horse, which altogether made a very fine set of 6 horses, of a beautiful mouse-colored dapple gray. Needing yet a coachman, Cinderella said, "I will go see if there's a rat in the rat trap. Perhaps we can make a coachman out of him." "You are right," replied the godmother. "Go and look." Cinderella brought the mousetrap to her, and in it were 3 huge rats. The fairy chose the one with the largest beard, and having touched him with her wand, he was turned into a fat jolly coachman who had the sharpest mustache eyes ever beheld. After that, she said to Cinderella, "Go again into the garden, and you will find 6 lizards behind the watering pot. Bring them to me." Cinderella had no sooner done so than her godmother turned them into 6 footmen, who skipped up immediately behind the coach. Their uniforms were all decorated with gold and silver, and they clung as close behind each other as if they had done nothing else their whole lives. The fairy then said to Cinderella, "You see here a coach fit to go to the ball. Are you not pleased with it?" "Oh, yes," she cried, "but must I go as I am in these nasty rags?" Her godmother touched her with her wand, and at that same instant her clothes were turned into cloth of gold and silver and beset with jewels. This done, she gave her a pair of glass slippers, the prettiest in the whole world. Being thus decked out, she got up onto her coach, but her godmother, above all things, commanded her not to stay till after midnight, telling her at the same time that if she stayed 1 moment longer, the coach would be a pumpkin again, her horses mice, her coachman a rat, and her footmen lizards, and her clothes would become just as they were before. Cinderella promised her godmother she would not fail to leave the ball before midnight. Then she drove away, scarce able to contain herself for joy. The king's son, who was told that a great princess whom nobody knew had come, ran out to receive her. He gave her his hand as she alighted from the coach and led her into the hall. Among all the company there was immediately a profound silence. They stopped dancing and the violins ceased to play. So attentive was everyone to contemplate the singular beauties of the unknown newcomer. Nothing was then heard but a confused noise of, "Ha! How beautiful she is!" The king himself, old as he was, could not help watching her and telling the queen that it was a long time since he had seen so beautiful and lovely a creature. All the ladies were busied in considering her clothes and headdress, that they might have some made after the same pattern. Provided they could find such wonderful materials and as able hands to make them. The king's son led Cinderella to the most honorable seat, and afterwards took her out to dance with him. She danced so very gracefully that they all the more admired her. A fine meal was served, but the young prince ate not a morsel, so intently was he gazing upon her. She went and sat down by her stepsisters, showing them great kindness, giving them part of the oranges and citrons which the prince had given her, which very much surprised them, for they did not know her. While Cinderella was thus amusing her stepsisters, she heard the clock strike 11 3/4, whereupon she immediately excused herself from the company and hurried away as fast as she could. When she got home, she ran to seek out her godmother, and after having thanked her, she said she could not but heartily wish that she might go to the next day to the ball, because the king's son had invited her. As she was eagerly telling her godmother what had passed at the ball, her two stepsisters knocked at the door, which Cinderella ran and opened. "How long you have stayed!" cried she, gaping, rubbing her eyes, and stretching herself as if she had been just awakened from sleep. She had not, of course, slept since they left. "If you had been at the ball," said one of the stepsisters, "you would not have been tired with it. There came the finest princess, the most beautiful ever seen with mortal eyes. She showed us great kindness and gave us oranges and citrons." Cinderella seemed very indifferent in the matter. Indeed, she asked them the name of the princess, but they told her they did not know it, and that the king's son was very taken with her and would not give all the world to know who she was. At this, Cinderella smiled and replied, "She must then be very beautiful indeed. How happy you have been." "Could I see her?" "She must then be very beautiful indeed. How happy you have been. Could I see her? Ah, dear Miss Charlotte, do lend me your yellow suit of clothes which you wear every day." "Ay, to be sure," cried Miss Charlotte. "Lend my clothes to such a dirty Cinderwetch as you are? I should be a fool." Cinderella indeed well expected such an answer, and was very glad of the refusal, for she would have been embarrassed if her stepsisters had lent her what she asked for in jest. The next day the two sisters were at the ball, and so was Cinderella, but dressed more magnificently than before. The king's son was always by her side, and never ceased his compliments and kind speeches to her. She quite forgot what her godmother had told her, so that she at last counted the clock striking 12 when she thought it was no more than 11. She then rose up and fled as nimble as a deer. The prince followed but could not overtake her. She left behind one of her glass slippers, which the prince picked up most carefully. She got home, but quite out of breath, and in her nasty old clothes, having nothing left of her finery but one of the little slippers, matching the one she dropped. The guards at the palace gate were asked if they had seen the princess leave the palace grounds. They had seen nobody go out but a young girl, very poorly dressed, who had more the air of a poor country wench than a gentlewoman. When the two sisters returned from the ball, Cinderella asked them if they had been well entertained, and if the fine lady had been there. They told her yes, but that she hurried away immediately when it struck 12, and with so much haste that she dropped one of her little glass slippers, the prettiest in the world, which the king's son had picked up, that he had done nothing but look at her all the time at the ball. Most certainly he was very much in love with the beautiful girl who owned the glass slipper. What they said was very true, for a few days later the king's son proclaimed by sound of trumpet that he would marry her whose foot this slipper would just fit. His stewards began to try upon the princesses, then the duchesses, and all the court, but in vain. It was also brought to the two sisters, who did all they possibly could to thrust their foot into the slipper, but to no avail. Cinderella, who saw this and knew her slipper, said to them, laughing, "Let me see if it will not fit me." Her sisters burst out laughing and began to ridicule her. The gentleman who was sent to try the slipper looked earnestly at Cinderella, and finding her very pretty, said it was only fair that she should try, and that he had orders that everyone try to put the slippers on. He asked Cinderella to sit down, and putting the slipper on her foot, he found it went on very easily, and fit her as if it had been made out of wax. The astonishment of her two sisters felt was excessively great, but it became even greater when Cinderella pulled out of her pocket the other slipper and put it on her foot. Thereupon it came her godmother, who touched Cinderella's clothes, making them Thereupon in came her godmother, who touched Cinderella's clothes, making them richer and more magnificent than any of those she had worn before. And now her two sisters found her to be the fine, beautiful lady whom they had seen at the ball. They threw themselves at her feet to beg pardon for all the ill treatment they had heaped upon her. Cinderella helped them up, and she embraced them, cried that she forgave them with all her heart, and desired them always to love her. She was left to the young prince, dressed as she was. He thought her more charming than ever, and a few days later married her. Cinderella, who was no less good than beautiful, gave her two sisters lodgings in the palace, and that very same day she matched them with two great lords of the court. So that was really unexpected. It ended beautifully. I was kind of expecting something morbid to happen. The end. Yay! We made it through the story. I'm going to show you some of the art. The art is incredible. And it's a little bit more modern. So maybe that's the difference. The art is the difference. Yes. Okay, this is her at the ball. Oh, so pretty. Oh, look at me, I'm so pretty. Oh, I'm so pretty. It's the first day. She made it out on time. Oh, so pretty. I'm so pretty. That's what I get. Let's put this back up. Here's her with the prince. And then they get married and everyone's happy. Look at how beautiful everyone is. Look at their happy smiles. Everyone's so happy. Look at her. She's so beautiful. So beautiful. The stepmother stayed alone. I'm imagining that's the stepmom. She does not look happy at all. She can keep that husband that didn't stand up for his daughter. Alright, guys. Thank you. It has been a lovely time reading out loud. I do hope that eventually I could get some music added to this. I have no idea how to do that. I've never done this before. But yeah, Let's be friends. Let's all be nice. Be nice to me. I'm an introvert, so this is way out of my comfort zone. But I really want to get good at talking to people, so that's why I'm doing this. I have horrible anxiety and it's hard for me to leave the house. And I want to change that because I want to travel. I want to travel the whole world. And I just want to make friends. A lot of friends. I want to have all the friends. Alright. I'll read to you guys sometime soon. Bye.